In the name of God, hello everybody. This is session 4 of your syntax lesson. As you know, in the previous session, I talked about the constituents of each sentences. I mean the phrases and the words. And then I talked about the relationship between the predicate and its arguments. Each predicate needs, its special arguments. So we have, different verbs according to the arguments it needs. Then we talk about the relationship between other parts of a speech like nouns, preposition, and adjective, which needs argument. In this session, I want to talk about the Theta Theory. What is Theta Theory? Let us consider the argument structure of the verb kill. You see here, we have a kind of verb, killed. It needs two kind of argument or participant. Margaret killed Poirot. You see here, the verb kill, needs two kind of argument, two NP, Margaret and Poirot. This is the subject of the verb kill, and this is the direct object of the verb. So in this example, the two argument NPs, Margaret and Poirot, are intuitively felt to stand in different semantic relationship with the verb. It means that they have a kind of different meaning, in relation to the verb. The argument NP Margaret in the subject position refers to the entity that is the agent of the activity of killing. We call this, position, this subject, as the agent, the doer of the action. And the argument Poirot, NP Poirot, the direct object, expresses the patient of the activity. So we call this subject agent and the direct object patient. Okay, there is no agreement about how many such a specific thematic roles there are and what their labels are. Some types are quite generally distinguished. These are the main, theta roles, which I want to talk about them. First of all, the agent, like the Margaret in this example, or the actor. The one, this is the definition of agent, the one who intentionally, initiates the action expressed by the predicate. Okay, this is the agent or actor. The second, theta role is patient. What is patient? The person or thing undergoing the action expressed by the predicate, Las Poirot in this example. The other theta role is theme. Again, the person or thing moved by the action expressed by the predicate. Theme is like the patient, okay? The other one, experiencer. The entity that experiences some psychological state expressed by the predicate. The beneficiary or benefactive, the entity that benefits from the action expressed by the predicate. This is the definition of these theta roles. Goal, what is goal? The entity towards which the activity expressed by the predicate is directed. Okay, this is the goal. The source, what is the source? The entity from which something is moved as a result of the activity expressed by the predicate. And the location, the place in which the action or state expressed by the predicate is situated. So these are the main theta roles, and these are the definition of these theta roles. Some, authors combine these two kind of theta roles, patient and theme, and they called both of them theme. Okay, this is just one point. And define it as theme, the entity affected by the action or state expressed by the predicate. So these are the main, theta roles of each, argument. For example, look at this example. If I ask you about the theta role of the arguments, you can see that here. For example, Galahad gave the detective story to Jane. You see here, this is the verb gave, which needs some arguments or participant. The first one in the place of the subject Galahad is the agent, I mean the doer of the action. This is the verb. The detective story, this is the theme. Okay, this is the theme. And to Jane, Jane here is benefactive or goal. Maybe goal, someone said this is the goal of the sentence, and someone says this is the benefactive of the sentence. The other example, Constance rolled the ball towards Poirot. You see here, rolled, this is the verb, so our subject is agent, the doer of the action. The ball, I mean the direct object is theme, and toward Poirot, because we use this kind of preposition, so Poirot is our goal, okay, because towards Poirot. You see here, these are the examples of tetraroles, and if I ask you in the final exam about this tetrarole, you can, I mean, define and you can determine the tetrarole of each argument. In government and binding theory, this is represented by means of a thematic grid or tetragrid. We call them tetragrid, which is part of the lexical entry of the predicate. For example, kill, the verb kill, would be given the lexical representation like this. It needs a kind of agent, NP, and a kind of patient, again, NP. It needs two kind of argument. The first one, I mean the tetrarole of the first one is the agent, and the second one is the patient. So these are the relationship of agent and verb and its arguments, like agent, patient, theme, goal, are the tetrarole. These are so the tetrarole. So the other title, the projection principle. What is projection principle? This is a kind of principle, you know. Lexical information is syntactically represented. So we want to, I mean, relate those tetraroles to the syntax again. The assignment of thematic roles. In this section, we look at the assignment of thematic roles in the syntax, okay? For example, causal arguments. You look at these example sentences, two maybe argument of a predicate, okay? Until now, we just, I mean, talk about the words as an argument of the verb, but maybe sometimes clause be I mean argument of the predicate. For example, Miss Marple has announced that Poirot had left. This is a kind of clause, that Poirot had left, yes, but it can be an argument of the verb announce. So the clause can be again the argument of predicate and the verb. So in this example, the argument are realized by an NP. I mean, Miss Marple is one of those arguments, and the clause that Poirot had left is another argument. So the verb announce has two arguments, needs two participants. The first one is Miss Marple, an NP, noun phrase, and the second one is a kind of clause that Poirot had left. You see here? Look at these examples. Margaret believes this story, and Margaret believes that the taxi driver is innocent. You see here, the verb believes in the first sentence needs two arguments. The first one is Margaret, a kind of noun, and the second one, this story, again is a kind of noun. So it needs two kind of noun. The second example you see here, the verb believes needs a kind of, I mean, you see, has a kind of, I mean, N as a argument, as an argument of the beliefs, Margaret, and the second argument is a kind of clause that the taxi driver is innocent. So we conclude that the verb believes can has a kind of two arguments. The first one is the NP, like Margaret, but the second one can be a kind of NP, like this story, or can be a kind of clause and sentence, like this one, that the taxi driver is innocent. You see here, the second argument of the verb believe can be a now NP or can be a kind of sentence. This is the verb believe, okay? You see here. or this one, I consider John a real idiot. You see here, it is evident that the small clause are of different types. In this example, the small clause consists of an NP, John. Okay, you see here, John a real idiot. This is a kind of a small clause. We call it a small clause. Consists of NP, John, and a second NP, a real idiot. It consists of two kind of NP. The first NP, John, acts as a subject to the second NP. We call it, a small clause. This is a kind of clause, okay? The other term which I want to talk about today in this session is expletives. Expletives, what is expletives? Some NPs in the subject position of the sentence are not assigned a thematic role, hence are not argument of the predicate. There are some NPs in the subject position which they have, they don't need a kind of thematic role. They don't have thematic role. Okay, what is these? These kind of NPs. It, an extra position. One of these expletive is it. You see here, for example, it surprised Jeeves that the pigs had been stolen. You see here, this is a kind of expletive. It's in the position of the subject of the sentence, but it hasn't, it doesn't need a kind of, thematic role. Okay, so it plays no role in the semantic makeup of the sentence, and that is presence is required simply for some structural reason. Okay, so it, as you know, it plays no role in the semantic of the sentence. The relevant explanation for the presence of it in the subject position, you see here, will be argued to be that English sentences must have an overt subject. Okay, we cannot omit the subject of English sentences. We should have an overt subject in each sentence in English, So the pronoun it here acts just as a mere, dummy pronoun. We call it dummy pronoun without semantic contribution to the sentence. Doesn't play any role in the meaning of the sentence. Just we call it dummy pronoun. So it is a placeholder just for the otherwise unfilled subject position. In the literature, such a dummy pronoun is often called, we call it expletive pronoun. So we call it expletive, okay, pronoun. The other expletive pronoun is there in English, So look at this sentence. 3 pigs are escaping, okay? So in this, first sentence, escaping is the verb and it needs one argument, 3 pigs. You see here? But in second sentence, there are 3 pigs escaping. You see here, we add another, contains another element, this sentence, which is the pronominal there, which occupies the subject position of the sentence. So the conclusion, we have seen that there are 2 pronouns in English, it, one of them is it, and the other there, that can be used without, being assigned a thematic role, okay? So they doesn't, have thematic role. They are expletives, okay? We call them expletives. Just filling the subject position for a structural reason. So, they doesn't have any meaning. Just they fill the subject position for a structural reason. One of those reasons is that English sentences needs an overt subject. So these elements, these expletives just occupy the subject position of English sentences for the structural reason. So here are the main verbs and auxiliary. We have 2 kind of verbs, as you know, main verb and auxiliary. Auxiliary verbs have some special properties distinguishing them from lexical verbs. So auxiliaries are different from main verbs. Auxiliaries and main verbs behave differently, for example, in negative and interrogative pattern. You see, for example, in English languages, we can, we can change the position of auxiliary with the subject for making a question sentence, but we cannot change the place of the main verb and the subject, as you know. So in negative and in question, or interrogative patterns, the behavior of the auxiliaries and the main verbs are different. So we are led to conclude that the auxiliary have, for example, the auxiliary like have, though morphologically like a verb in that it is inflected for tense, person, and number, doesn't assign any thematic roles of its own. So one of the main differences between main verbs and auxiliaries is that neither auxiliaries nor the copula, the be form, to be form, be assigned thematic roles. Okay, just main verbs can assign thematic roles to its arguments. Auxiliaries cannot assign thematic role to the argument. So this is the main difference between main verbs and auxiliaries. The other difference, for example, the behavior in negative sentences and in interrogative sentences, they are different from each other. But the main verb in this part is that just the main verbs can assign thematic roles like agent, patient, theme to its arguments, but auxiliaries cannot assign thematic roles to their arguments. So this is the main difference between auxiliaries and main verbs. This is one of our principles in syntax. You should know this principle. It's a kind of important principle. The extended projection principle, we call it EPP, the abbreviation EPP. So we call it the EPP. It's a kind of principle. What is this principle? The subject position of a sentence must be filled. This is the definition of this principle. The subject position of a sentence must be filled. It means that sentences must have subjects. This is the principle, the rule. Sentences must have subject. So, for example, each sentence should or must have a kind of subject, NP, auxiliary, VP. So, you see here, it must have subject. For example, look at these examples. Margaret accused Poirot. You see here we have a subject, so this sentence is correct and grammatical. But if we omit the subject, just we say accused Poirot Margaret. You see here in this sentence we don't have subject here, so our sentence is ungrammatical. You see here we put here asterisk or star here. You see here, so this is a kind of ungrammatical sentence, because this principle here is not we cannot we don't use subject here. So this is according to this principle, this sentence is ungrammatical. So the ungrammaticality of this sentence follows from the extended projection principle, EPP here. The subject position here is not filled. You see here, so this is ungrammatical. So this is one of those main principles. You should know this principle. Sentences must have subjects. The last part of this session and this chapter is the subject theta role. Okay, the theta role assigned to the subject is assigned compositionally. What it means? It is determined by the semantic of the verb and other VP constituents. Roughly, the verb, assign an object first in each sentence. The verb assign, object theta role. So the verb assign an object role first. So the resulting verb argument complex will assign a theta role to the subject. The subject argument is as if it were slotted in last. So first the verb assign the theta role to the object, then both of these the verb and the object compositionally assign theta role to the subject. Okay, if a predicate assign a thematic role directly to some constituent, we shall say that the predicate theta marks the constituent directly. So the verb, directly, directly theta marks the object. So the verb theta marks the object directly, but theta marks the subject indirectly. So if the predicate theta marks an argument compositionally, we call this indirect theta mark. Theta role assigned to internal arguments will be referred to as internal theta role. That assigned indirectly to the external argument is often referred to as external theta role. So we see here the verb, for example, accuse, has two kinds of arguments, the subject, the direct object. First, it assigns the theta role to the direct objects directly. Then both of these elements, the verb and the direct object, both of them compositionally assign the theta mark the subject indirectly. So again, the verb can assign theta role to the object directly, so we call it internal argument, and we call the subject external argument, which the verb compositionally theta marks the subject. So this is the subject theta role process, you see here. So again the verb theta marks the direct object directly. Then both of these the verb and the direct object compositionally assign the theta role of the subject, so we call it indirect theta marking. This is the definition of and the process of the subject theta role. Okay, this is the end of the chapter. So in this chapter again we talk about the theta roles, the main theta roles, the definition of main theta roles, like the agent, the patient, theme, goal, experiencer, and again we talk about the relationship between the verb and its arguments, and then we talk about the expletives like it and there. Then we talk about this principle, EPP, extended projection principle, which it means that each sentence should have the subject. And at last we talk about the subject theta role process. As you know, the verb compositionally assign theta role to the subject, but directly assign the theta role to the direct object. And thank you for your attention. This is enough for this session, and this is the end of the chapter number 1. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye everybody.